Right, so we looked at this Arby's sandwiches in the last video where we identified the W's for those examples. And at the end of that video, I asked you to pause the video and try these other three. So if you did that, hang tight. I'll come back and explain those in a second. If you didn't, go ahead and pause the video now and give those a try. Okay, so the reason I do this is so you get lots of practice and you can see if you're right or wrong. So you get that immediate feedback. And then that should help your homework go a lot more smoothly as well, because it's really easy to sit in class and nod your head and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then you go look at the homework and it doesn't. So this is my way of just kind of helping reinforce that. So the homework hopefully is pretty smooth for you. All right, so hopefully you pause the video there. Let's take a look at these. I actually want to start with number 3, which is that herbal remedy. So scientists at a major pharmaceutical firm conducted an experiment to study the effectiveness of an herbal compound to treat the common cold. Okay. They exposed each patient to a cold virus and they either got the herbal compound or a sugar solution known to have no effect. So that sugar solution is what's known as a placebo. And you might have heard that word before, but if not, we'll talk about that probably about midway through the course. Several days later, they assessed each patient's condition using a cold severity scale ranging from 0 to 5. They found no evidence of the benefits of the compound. So the who is going to be the patients that they exposed to the cold. And then there are variables here. So this is maybe a little bit tricky to do these variables, but I would say there are 2 here. And the first one is the treatment. And so for the treatment, you either got this herbal remedy or you got the sugar solution. Okay, so you got one of those 2 things. And this would be a categorical variable. There's definitely nothing measured there, units. And then the other one is this cold severity scale. And again, I would say this one is categorical as well. This isn't really something you can measure. I'm thinking this is probably more like, how bad is your cold? Oh, I feel great. That's a 0. Oh, I feel 5. I'm super miserable and can't get out of bed. Right? So they're using these numbers in place of words. And so I would say that this one is also categorical. They don't tell us when they did this. So I'll put an NA for when. They don't really say where. You could have put the pharmaceutical company. That would have been okay. If you put NA, that also works. The house. They told us they did an experiment. And then the purpose was to study the effectiveness of the herbal compound on the common cold. So maybe something like herbal compound treats cold. All right, so that is kind of a good stab at number 3, the herbal remedy. We have 2 more left. That's number 2 and 4 at the bottom of the page. Let's give number 2 a go. So this one is a startup company is building a database for each of its customers. It records the name, as well as the ID number, region, date of purchase, amount, and item purchased. So the who is going to be these customers, and I would probably say that that's really the customer name. I'm not quite sure how you would have a customer separate from its name, I guess, unless you were identifying the name of the representative that made the order. Those are most likely the same thing. We do have an ID number. We have a region. We have date of last purchase, amount, and the item. Okay, so 2 of these are a little bit tricky. So let's start with maybe these easier ones. The last 2 are the easiest. So the amount, this could be like we spent $2,500 on a new copy machine or something like that. So we have that $2,500. It's got some units and a number to it. So that amount is quantitative. The item, so maybe we bought a coffee machine, maybe we bought a tea maker, we bought a laptop computer. So those are all words that we're using as an answer, not numbers. They're measurable. So that would be categorical. We'll look at the region next. So for the region, they used 1 for east, 2 for south, and so on. And so even though those are numbers, they're not measurable. They don't have units. And really, we're just using those numbers in place of a word. And so that makes the region categorical. And then we have the last two left. So ID number. If your only choices are between categorical and quantitative, I would say that the ID number is categorical. It's certainly not quantitative, that's for sure. There is actually another classification of variables called ordinal variables, and we don't deal with those in this class. If you took another stats class, if you're going to take like psych or social stats, they generally cover ordinal variables in there. And really, they're just classification things like student ID numbers, your social security number, things like that. And so if your choices are between categorical and quantitative, it's definitely categorical. And then the date of the purchase. So this one can kind of go either way depending on how you have it set in Excel. If you have it set as a date that's calculable, like you could calculate how many days from their last purchase, then that would tend to be more quantitative. If you're just recording the date to record the date, and it's not being used in a specific way, or if you're putting that in a category, like the purchase was 1 month ago, 1 to 3 months ago, 3 to 6 months ago, then that's definitely categorical. So this one could go either way. This is why I would never ask you that on a test, because unless I told you what the options were. So I would take either one on there. The when. So they don't tell us when they did this. The where. I would assume that this was just done at the company, but maybe they hired somebody out. So you could put NA there. You could put at the company. Either of those would be fine. The how. So they don't really state how they did this. You could put NA. You could put that they pulled records. That would be my guess, is they pulled up records and started inputting this data in. And then the why. So they don't overtly state why they're doing this, but it is a little bit telling. They're making a database of customers and sales information, specifically that sales information. Really tells me that they are working on ramping up sales. Maybe sales have diminished and they're trying to get them back on track. But my guess would be that this is some sort of sales type of objective for doing this. So if you put NA, that's fine. If you put good record keeping, I would take that. That seems fair enough. If you put that they're trying to increase sales or something to do with sales, that would be fine as well. So once again, on the homework and on the exams, the things that you do one-on-one, these are much more clear-cut. So the classwork or guided notes and the quizzes that you do in a group that have a little bit of gray area to them. So there's a little bit of thought that can go on there. All right, the last one, medical research. So medical research is quite the endeavor. If you read through this, you'll know that they had 101 variables they keep track of, which is very common and very exhausting when you work with medical researchers. So it says medical researchers at a large city hospital were investigating the impact of prenatal care on newborn health, and they collected data from 882 births during 1998 to 2000, and then they kept track of everything in the kitchen sink. So the who here. So this is a little bit tricky. I know this usually throws classes for a loop. The who here is actually these 882 births. Okay. And so it helps that they said they collected data from those, which gives you the idea that these are the individuals. If they didn't quite state it that way, maybe you wrote down that it was the mother. So that's kind of the other common answer that people put down. It's the person who gave birth as the who. And the problem with that is if somebody had twins, then the mother would be listed twice in that database, right? And so each individual has to be unique in your sample. So that would be a problem. It's also possible, this is over 2 years, it's also possible someone could have gotten pregnant twice. So my brother and I are 13 months apart, and if you had timed this just right, my mom would have ended up with 2 entries on here. Okay, so the babies is going to be what gives us a unique individual for each one. So the what? So we have the mother's age. We have number of weeks the pregnancy lasted. So both of those I would think are quantitative unless they set the age up as like 20 to 25, 26 to 30. But if they just straight up said, how old are you? That would be quantitative. Type of birth. So they have C-section, induced, and natural. So that'll be categorical. They literally tell us what the categories are. The level of prenatal care. And again, they give us the choices here as none, minimal, or adequate. So that's categorical. The birth weight. And that's probably in pounds and ounces. That'll make that quantitative. The sex of the baby, so that'll be categorical. And whether the baby exhibited health problems. And they give us the choices of none, minor, or major. So that tells us that's categorical. All right, so there's our collection of variables. I think we have them all. The when, so they do tell us this is 1998 to 2000. The where, so this is a large city hospital. Okay, and that would be important to note rather than just saying it's at a hospital, because there could be serious differences between how births happen, say, in Denver versus how they happen in our hospital in Gunny, right? Two very different sized places. The how. This just says they collected data, which I would assume just means pulling it out of their records. And then the why. So one of the whys kind of stated here is they're looking at the impact of prenatal care on newborn health. So prenatal care impacts newborn health. Would kind of be the best guess from the available information here. One of the other things that would be important about this research is actually the United States has the worst maternal outcomes of having babies. So in other words, what that means is a significant number compared to other first world countries, a significant number of women die after giving birth. Okay, and so that's something that's a huge question in medicine right now that's really been investigated the last 5 or 6 years, especially prior to COVID. It was something that a lot of people were very interested in because that's a terrible thing. The mother made it all the way through birth and then to pass away hours or a day later, that seems like that should be something that's eminently correctable. And so probably part of this research is that even though that's not stated there, this is probably research that is also kind of lending towards that. Okay, so sometimes, that's not stated, but I like to kind of keep you guys apprised of maybe some of the current research or things that you might see if you're just kind of zipping around the internet. All right, so hopefully you did fairly well with those. We'll come back for the next lecture and we'll look at kind of dividing that who up a little bit more into a sample and a population. So we'll get a little bit more practical.